Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Forge of Freedom podcast. I'm your host, Alex Ooley, and this is episode 189 of the Forge of Freedom. Today, I'm pleased to be joined by Daniel Francisco. Daniel is a passionate advocate for the right to keep and bear arms. He also happens to be the mayor of Englishtown, New Jersey. Daniel has been at the forefront of challenging excessive firearm permitting fees and restrictive gun laws, including a recent resolution by the borough of Englishtown to refund a portion of the state's $200 carry permit fee, a move seen as a step toward recognizing its unconstitutionality. Additionally, Daniel is a plaintiff in the case Struck v. Platkin, which takes on New Jersey's one gun a month ban, arguing that it infringes on the fundamental right to keep and bear arms. In this discussion, we'll dive into Daniel's journey, the legal battles shaping firearms rights, and his vision for a freer future. Mayor Francisco, welcome to the
talk
Forge
to
of
you,
Freedom.
Alex. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time to join the podcast. This is exciting for me. We didn't know each other prior to recording and talking here. I actually found out about you through John Petrolino, who writes for Bearing Arms, and he actually wrote an article about this resolution in your town there in New Jersey that refunds at least a portion of the fees that the state imposes to get a permit. So we want to get into that a little bit, but before we do, if you would tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, tell us who you are and how you came to be mayor there in Englishtown, and what you're up to in terms of fighting for the right to keep and
Sure.
bear arms.
So I'm a person that was agnostic to politics, political philosophy, any of that stuff until I got into university. So I went to Rutgers University in New Jersey, the State School of New Jersey, and I met this cast of characters that were doing video activism against people in different activist groups, against the deans, against the administrative staff. And these people had this paper called the Centurion, which ended up being the precursor to Project Veritas. And although I didn't understand the politics, I was addicted to the product. I was addicted to the process of what they were doing. These people were minorities. They were guerrillas, right? They were the people fighting against a bigger system that had more power over them. But somehow they managed to get these philosophical victories, these social victories over these Goliaths in the administration and the school. And I couldn't have, explained to you, rhetoric about liberty or politics or anything, any sort of that philosophical rhetoric, but I was addicted to it. I was addicted to that movement, if you will. And my political philosophy I would say that was my birth, being conscious politically, has changed so much from the age of 18 to 38. I'm about to be 39 in a few days, right? I was like a neocon back then. We're talking about the shadow of 9/11, the war in Iraq, the Bush years. There was a lot of people that believed things a certain way, believed in the war effort, believed in the administrative state and the federal government, usurping people's privacy. And I remember being in that state of mind back then and justifying all of this. I remember believing in it. And I would say that I slowly, over the next decade, over the next 10 or so years, creeped from being like a retail partisan Republican to being much more of a true liberty advocate. And I don't even really define myself on that spectrum anymore. But I had no interest in retail politics. I ended up becoming the executive director at Project Veritas in 2012 because I knew the people that were working at the organization that were the founders. And I proudly opened their first office in New York, had a bunch of outsized impacts on some activism stunts that we did, some videos that got into mainstream media and earned millions of dollars in earned media. And we took down certain outfits, certain political candidates, changed culture and a lot of things. And again, that feeling of addiction, that feeling of fun and fulfillment and purpose that I got from that just ignited me. I loved it. I went back to the corporate world after that for some years. And, while you build your life and, I love my family. I have a wife and 2 kids. And while that's definitely the most fulfilling aspect of my life, on a professional level, nothing ever hit that high that I got working in the movement, working in activism fronts. So I got involved in my local government for a silly reason. It was something to do with the trash pickup, something mundane that everybody can kind of relate to. And when I got in, I quickly realized that these people that I thought were like geniuses and they must know all this process and political procedure. It's intimidating when you don't know how politics works. You don't know how Robert's Rules of Order works or how parliamentarian tricks work. And politics can be sort of this like curtain that is behind you. You don't understand what's going on behind it. It's vague. It's intimidating. And then I started to go into meetings and I realized, no, these people aren't impressive at all. They don't. They're just normal Joe schmoes. They're not these like evil geniuses twirling their mustache and hatching plans. They're quite mundane. So I got involved. I was like a pariah by myself. I got into the council eventually after a year or two of failing. And once I got in, I started learning all the tricks, all the parliamentary moves, all the regulatory moves, and slowly built up a coalition over years, knocking out incumbents. And in 2023, we had a mayoral race in my town. The incumbent mayor had been the mayor for 23 straight years. It would have been 24 by the time he termed, and no one had ever run against him. That's how, uh, what's the word that Gavin McGinnis always says? He goes, mental obesity. Like, the psychologically, they never get tested. So they're just lazy, right? They're mentally lazy. So I ran against the incumbent mayor and I won on 3-1, like a pretty handy difference. So I became the mayor. And on the local level, we're doing a lot in terms of like small town politics, like building up a commercial community, bringing in investors from outside the town. It's really not partisan stuff, right? It's just more logistical type stuff. But in my heart, I'm still an activist. I've been involved in the firearm rights movement for about 15 years, also locally in New Jersey. And I wasn't going to miss an opportunity to marry that passion, that love into the political side, and even in my own little realm. So, we engaged in this process to abolish carry permit fees under 2C58-4. And it's kind of been a spark that's ignited a wildfire in the movement in New Jersey.
Yeah, and this resolution actually passed, right? I mean, it's the Englishtown passed the resolution, and you're now remitting or returning some of the fees, right, that are required for the permit in New Jersey.
Yeah, so I consulted with our attorney. His name is Jonathan Cohen, great guy, works out of a firm called Plush and Cohen, where he's one of the partners. And I said, look, this is what I want to do. Here's what people in the movement will help us with outside our borders if we pull it off. How can we do this by protecting our residents' rights, but also protecting ourselves from the scrutiny, the legal scrutiny of the state? So he structured it and he helped word it in such a way where we are still accepting the payment and requiring the applicant to make the payment. That's what allows us to skirt the scrutiny of our attorney general and our state legislature or law enforcement from the state. We take the money with the application, and whether the applicant's adjudicated as a yes or a no, we created a resolution 2025-101, which permits the applicant to then return to the borough, address the clerk or the CFO and say, here's my receipt for my $150 fee. I would like a refund. And we backdated the ability to earn to acquire that refund to January 1, 2025. So anyone who's a resident of our borough will never have a liability on their carry permit fees under 2C58-4. And not only did we vote it, we did face opposition. There's one person we have an all Republican council. One person on the council said no outright. And there was maybe one or two others that asked some questions in discussion before the vote, and they were a little skeptical. But I think they saw where my passion lied and what I wanted to do, and we did a good job explaining procedurally. I know your audience is not a New Jersey audience, but procedurally in New Jersey, for you to even get to the step of having a carry permit, you must have gotten an FPIC, which is a firearms purchaser identification card. That's what allows you to buy long arms and ammunition. That requires the same background check as the carry application. Then there's what's called a permit to purchase a handgun. That is a separate application, which requires its own background check, which is wholly identical to the FPIC and the carry application. And then finally, there's the carry permit application, which is a separate statute from the other two. All three of those require you to go through the same administrative background check. So it stands to reason that if one fee is like 20 something bucks and the other fee is 20 something bucks, and the final fee, which you must have done the prior to even have the opportunity to exercise that application, is 150 bucks. That just like defies all logic. Or what about the third check that's duplicatively checking the same background? Like, time doesn't change in the past, right? Like, nothing can change in the past. So if you've done something 2 checks, you're only checking what your background is from your last check to today, right? You're not going back in time to recheck if you were a felon prior to those last 2 checks. And the state has structured this in a very foolish way because they're greedy, and they made the most expensive part the last part. Now, they did this as a reaction to Bruin, because prior to 2022 and prior to our colloquially called carry killer bill in December of 2022, the fee at the municipal level was, wait for it, $0. They collected nothing. So to argue that 2 years ago there was no labor cost behind checking people's carry permit background checks, and now saying, it's actually 4 times as expensive now out of nowhere, that's obviously nonsense, right? That's not based in any sort of rationality. And it's especially not based in rationality when you've already been duplicatively checked twice before. So they did it to basically punt to the municipalities, the state legislators, and said, okay, Bruin just knocked our teeth in. We can't discriminate on people based on them not having a justifiable need to have a handgun. This means all these peons are going to come out and apply for carry permits. Why don't we just smash them with exorbitant fees? The municipalities won't fight us because it's going to be a boon financially for them. And even the Republican or right-leaning towns, they'll be reticent to do anything about that, because who doesn't like free money? Who doesn't like more revenue when you're a government leech? So it was a smart tactical move, but they didn't account for people who are pure of heart, people like us in Englishtown, who are going to say, you know what, screw the state. We don't care what Trenton says. We're going to do the right thing morally and legally, in my opinion, and we're going to refund it back to you. And since we did it 2-3 weeks ago, there's another borough called Franklin Borough, who I drove 2 hours across to the north part of the state to speak in defense of their resolution, which they also passed last week. And I will be speaking at a meeting on Wednesday in another town that's considering it. There's probably about 12 towns right now that are batting it around. I think by the end of the year, we'll probably have a few dozen. And there is a magic number that the activists in our space want us to get to. I won't say that publicly, but when they get to that number, I think you're going to see other action ensue.
Okay, gotcha. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. That was going to be one of my questions. How many other towns are taking similar initiatives? But I want to just go back to the mention of Bruin a little bit. Almost all of our listeners will know what that is. Of course, it was the Supreme Court case out of New York that challenged the May issue and the requirement to show good cause for the need to carry a firearm in New
Yep.
York. And of course, the Supreme Court struck down the law in New York and said that these good cause requirements are too subjective. They're not consistent with the text, history, and tradition of the Constitution and the history of our country. And so many states like New Jersey had similar laws. Can you tell us, was it exactly like the process in New York where you had to beg for permission to exercise your right, and you had to show good cause, and it had to be more than I just want to exercise my constitutionally protected right? What was the process like before Bruin? And then, of course, you mentioned they put in these impediments after Bruin. But first, if you would tell us a little bit about what it was like before Bruin.
Yeah, so it's somewhat serendipitous that you're asking me this question, because I was the plaintiff in another federal case called Francisco v. Cook, where I was making the same constitutional claim as NYSPRA. I was doing the same exact thing. I was challenging 2C58-4 in New Jersey statutes, and they call good cause in New York as their nomenclature. Our nomenclature is justifiable need. Essentially, they're the same thing. And I sued back in 21, I believe it was 21 or late 20. I don't remember the exact time frame now, where I hooked up with FPC, whose shirt I'm proudly wearing and supporting today. They whittled down a bunch of candidates that had clean records. They picked me and another individual, Ori Katzen, and we sued We went through the process at the local level, at the superior court, and then sued in federal court. So New Jersey had the same exact environment as New York. The only mild difference is that New York had philosophical differences from county to county. So there were counties where I believe you were able to achieve a permit, and there was this sort of discretion at the judicial level at each county. New Jersey did not have that. New Jersey had the justifiable need clause, which swept the statutes across every county in the state. And the only way you could get that permit is if you had that justifiable need. You know, that did not include former law enforcement. That's a separate permit. That's essentially like celebrities, family members of politicians, politicians themselves. In fact, there was a famous clip several years ago in Atlantic County, which is down by Atlantic City in South Jersey, where a prosecutor who was so your permits were adjudicated at the county level at the superior court in New Jersey. There was a famous clip where a prosecutor who was advocating against a plaintiff who was asking for his permit, right? And they were going to reject him, as they always did, like they rejected me. And on video, the prosecutor famously said something like, "Your Honor, in fact, the only person I know who's ever gotten a carry permit in this court is you." He literally pointed at the judge. Like, if that doesn't show you how tyrannical this system was, you know, only the magistrates and the elite were able to achieve a carry permit. In fact, in a state of 9 million people prior to Bruin, New Jersey had about, I think it was less than 2,000 carry permits, which is nothing. It's statistically irrelevant, right? And when you consider how many rich celebrities and politicians and athletes, you know, professional athletes live in the state, I'm actually shocked it was that low. But you could not get a permit, and that's because even prior to Bruin, again, it's all different now. Prior to Bruin, you had to apply to your police department, and because it was so rare, the police departments would illegally lie to you and tell you couldn't apply, even though the statute clearly said you could. And that was a difference of opinion I had with a lot of people. These people wouldn't let you apply. And if you did apply, even if your chief was colluding with you and approving you and arguing that you had justifiable need, when obtusely no one ever did, right? Not legally in New Jersey's legal definition, you still had to appeal to the superior court, and then a seasoned prosecutor would testify why you shouldn't have that permit, and the judge would rubber stamp whatever the prosecutor said. So it was the sort of thing where nobody wanted to ever apply because they, in my opinion, falsely believed that if they ever got rejected, they'd have to forever answer on their future background checks for purchases that they had been rejected at one point. And they believed, again, falsely, that would prevent them from ever having a gun. So there was this chilling effect. Now, I went through the process, and I won't bore your listeners because they're not from New Jersey, but I went through this whole process. I got rejected. There was a lot of corruption that happened even during my process. But I think it was August 2021 is when we actually filed the suit in federal court. And NISPRA was granted cert November of 2021. I think that's when it happened.
I think it was argued in November of 2021. So,
okay, correct. Yeah. Argued. The oral arguments, yes.
Yeah.
But it was granted cert maybe shortly after August, like October, September, right, somewhere around there. So it was sort of like odd timing because we were making the same constitutional claim as Bruin and as NISPRA. And when we were in federal court, the judge said, well, your case is wholly similar to NISPRA v. Bruin, and it just got into the Supreme Court. So we're going to stay this case and wait for this case to finish. So basically, I won my case by virtue of Bruin passing almost a year later in June of 2022. Now, here's the rub. Nobody got carry permits in New Jersey prior to Bruin, ostensibly. I'm now in federal court as Clarence Thomas's opinion just shred New Jersey's legal argument to nothing. Now, my lawyers are going to the Attorney General's office, who's their opponent in federal court, and saying, amongst the different forms of relief that our client is seeking, One of them is the actual issuance of the permit. In addition to our constitutional claims, you need to rehear his permit. So the Attorney General's office agreed to remand my application back down to the Superior Court. So June was SCOTUS. In August, I got in front of a judge in Superior Court, and he wouldn't rule the day that I was there. I had a pretty well-known attorney who is very well-known in the Second Amendment space, and he didn't rule and told me to come back like a week later. Came back a week later, granted my permit, but placed a 4 or 5 page court order, judge's order, restricting me on how I could use it. And it was so laughably obtuse, Alex. Like, they cited 2C58-4, which is the carry statute. And then they cited 39-6, which is a traffic statute. It's a travel statute for vehicles. And basically, to boil down all the crazy restrictions, they listed all these sensitive places in my court order. They said that I could never drive in a vehicle with a weapon on my person. I had to obey 39-6. 39-6 is our statute that prescribes how you must travel with a firearm when going to a range, with a gun fastened in a case, with the ammunition separate, and a compartment in the rear of the vehicle like a trunk. You can't both carry a gun while still observing that statute. They're contradictory, because the whole point of the 2C58-4 carry permit is that it is a reprieve from those other rules. So this judge, in my opinion, maliciously and knowingly, because I've heard rumor later on of conversations with the Attorney General's office, they laughed at me, wrote up this crazy court order where I got my carry permit, but I could not carry lawfully, because I would have to excuse me, bring a handgun in my trunk to, say, Walmart, not have it on my person, get out of my car, open my trunk, and then in public, take out a handgun, take it out of a case, take a magazine out, load the magazine individually with cartridges, feed that magazine rack, holster it, and do this all in public view, because I legally could not put it on myself. And I legally could not have those parts together per 39-6. So they basically gave me FU, don't carry permit, or go get shot into Swiss cheese by cops and other carry permit holders, or have a soccer mom call 911 and say, this maniac just pulled a gun out of his trunk, loaded it, and walked into Walmart. So basically, they wanted me to die. That's what they wanted me to do. Now, the best part, Alex, is the Democrats in our legislature literally took my court order from August from this Republican county, former Republican Party chair, former sheriff, judge. They mirrored the terms of my court order identically and passed it as state law 3 months later, 4 months later in December, which is this colloquially called carry killer bill, which is now being challenged in the third district with, I believe, Judge Bum is the judge sitting on that decision. Okay. So when you ask about, what was it like? I'm the reason the law is there now as it sits. They literally copied my order. And even though I was the first person in my county to have a carry permit, I couldn't lawfully carry. If I had tried to, I'd be committing a felony in order to be able to carry. It's a contradictory thing. So
the judge, it sounds like, was just coordinating with the Attorney General's office about how to craft his order based on what the Attorney General was going to push as the new law.
I mean, that's your hypothesis, Alex. It might be true. I don't know. But I think that's an astute observation. I think there was some element of coordination, obviously, between these parties. How could this happen? I mean, the sensitive places thing is being challenged as well, which is absurd. I had to get written permission from any private property owner. How the hell can I get written permission from Target Corporation or Walmart or, Burger King or whatever business I walk into? And imagine the absurdity of a guy walking in the door at Walgreens and saying, everyone, I'm carrying a gun. Is the manager okay with this? Like, how am I supposed to achieve permission from all these private property owners? And forget public property. It was banned everywhere in public property. So sensitive places is part of the lawfare going on right now. And the travel restriction, which other people also received a similar restriction after me. Now, since that bill came out, they've consolidated a lot of the adjudication process and have gotten rid of the superior court. They're no longer part of the equation. So now your permit is adjudicated by your local police department, and it ends there. I'll say one last thing. 2C58-4 prior to Bruin in New Jersey had a shoot. We always had a shooting practical, a live fire component to the application. And that wasn't the only thing. You had to take a course, you had to pass a written test, you had to do a live fire, practical. You had to get notarized forms, all this kind of nonsense, 4 references. Prior to Bruin, 2C58-4 didn't even define what the shooting practical was. It didn't say a prescription for what that test looked like. It didn't say you must shoot so many rounds from this distance, this distance, this distance, on your knees, standing up, weak hands, mag switch, hand switch. None of this was prescribed, right? Because so few people ever did it, the legislature didn't care, and the police unions were agnostic because they're like, who cares if there's a prescription? No one ever satisfies this requirement. So they never defined it. When I, engaged in doing it on purpose in order to sue and change the law, my lawyer said, well, I said, what kind of course should I go shoot? Like, what certificate should I get? The law doesn't say it. And they're like, go ask your chief and do, for the sake of our purposes, do whatever they say. Our chief called the prosecutor's office, the county prosecutor. Now think of the corruption of this. The law said that my chief is my first adjudicant, and then the prosecutor is the second. Well, the superior court, not the prosecutor. The judge is the second adjudicant. Why would I go ask the second adjudicant to make up their own fake policy of what course I must shoot just for them to reject me anyway, right? It's almost like a masochistic thing. And it's definitely corrupt. Like, they should not be the one prescribing that. The legislature should be the one prescribing that, because the law is silent, right? Technically, I should be able to shoot any course because it says I must shoot a course, but it doesn't say what the course contains. So the prosecutor said, make him shoot the state police practical, which I'm not saying it's impossible, but for a layman shooter, if you shoot that test and you're not a seasoned shooter, you're going to fail it, right? It's like a 90% failure rate amongst like layman shooters. Yeah. And for many months after Bruin, they still didn't have a prescription for it. So I shot that test. I passed it. So I basically was equally proficient as a state police officer or any police officer. And since then, they've changed that too. So there's a lot of corruption, a lot of crazy stuff that you endure at the hands of the state in New Jersey. That's for sure.
Yeah. So in the wake of Bruin, which of course, as we were talking about, struck down New York's may issue and good cause requirement, states like New Jersey that had similar requirements, which basically gave discretion to local officials, local bureaucrats about whether or not you could have a license to carry a firearm. They were left thinking, okay, well, we can't have these may issue schemes anymore with good cause requirements or justifiable need requirements. So now how are we going to keep people from exercising their right to keep and bear arms, right? And it's through all these mechanisms that you're talking about, by imposing exorbitant fees, by imposing, these subjective or outlandish training requirements, or requiring 3 permits, or having all these sensitive places. Okay, people have a right to carry firearms, but they don't have a right to carry a firearm in what we prescribe as a sensitive place, right? What sorts of places in New Jersey are considered sensitive places, just by example?
I mean, so legally that's being disputed in federal court, right? And there's lots of silly ones. So basically anywhere that serves alcohol, anywhere where children are present, anywhere where a mass of people may gather, right? These vagaries that give immense leeway to the state to prosecute you. So what's a mass of people? A parade, 3 guys standing on the corner, a soccer game at a children's soccer game, a baseball, t-ball game. Who's going to define this, right? Any sort of public park, any government building. in its most obtuse form, it was basically all public property, ostensibly, and then any private property where you didn't have express permission from the owner. So the onus is on the carrier, the person carrying the firearm, to establish permission or establish that they had permission with the private property owner, which again, that's an impossible task. I can't I can't walk down the sidewalk and get permission from the easement of everybody I walk by. I can't go to a store of a major corporation and get permission from a headquarters that's 2,000 miles away. I can't announce that I'm carrying and cause alarm because that's another crime in and of itself. So look, we have to like reverse engineer this. This is not a bug. It's a feature, right? They do this intentionally. We know this. They do this to make it so impossible and so dangerous for you to even think of exercising this right that you just don't do it. And in fact, most people don't.
Because I presume the violation of New Jersey's statute is not just an infraction, right? It's a crime. I assume.
It's a minimum mandatory state's prison sentence. We have what's called the Graves Act, and you're basically like if you get charged with a firearm felony of this variety, and you go to the jurisdiction that adjudicates you at the state level, say the jury finds you guilty, the judge has zero discretion. You must go serve that minimum mandatory prison time. So this is very serious stuff. It's just not like, hey, I cheated on my taxes by, $15,000 and you're going to get, a 6-month prison sentence, slap on the wrist. This is major time for something that can be an innocent mistake with no victim, right? No one's aggrieved, no one's harmed, no one's hurt. But just because of you misunderstanding a technicality or an obtuse prosecutor bending the law in their favor because they have the power to do so, they can ruin your life. And it's a very dangerous ground to tread upon, which is why it's important that we keep battling this stuff in the courts. But yeah, it can. This allows them to wreak havoc on a lot of people for daring to exercise a right.
What do you say when people ask you, why don't you just leave New Jersey? I mean, it sounds like such a terrible place. They don't care about your freedom. They don't care about your individual liberty. They're trying to tax you out of it. They're trying to regulate you out of it. They're trying to put you in jail if you even think about exercising your right to keep and bear arms. What do you say to people who ask you that question?
I get asked that question a lot in interviews. I really do. And I don't know if this answer makes sense to people, resonate with a lot of people. But one, this is my identity. I grew up here, right? I identify with New Jersey. My family are immigrants that came here in the 80s. I was born here. New Jersey is part of me. And I love New Jersey. I love my home. Even though I don't like the political climate, I identify in a very romantic way with the state. It's my home. It's my place to be. And could I run away? And have I thought about running away? Many times. I actually came very close prior to me moving to Englishtown. I was this close to moving to Texas. I had a job lined up. My wife had a job lined up. Our son wasn't born yet. I was this close to moving there. And a relevant thing happened that stopped that from happening, and we stayed here. But this kind of speaks to something I said at the beginning of the interview. I enjoy being the minority in a weird way. It's exciting to me. It's fun. I like the challenge. I feel like I would be bored if I lived in a place where everyone just agreed with me. Everybody thought that we were correct. And in a weird way, like if I was just able to do whatever I wanted, I almost feel like I'd be sloth, like I'd be lazy. And I don't know if that makes sense. That might seem counterintuitive, but since those days in college where I was at a public university with 35,000 students, basically a huge microcosm of our society, I got an amazing thrill. I got immense pleasure out of being like the Spartan facing, in the Battle of Thermopylae versus Xerxes' forces and tens of thousands of hordes of enemies. There is something intoxicating about it. There is something addicting about it. I cannot explain it to you in in a more eloquent way. I feel like I'm at a loss for words, but it's a romantic thing to me. I like being the little guy. I enjoy finding allies in the jungle. I enjoy finding people who think like me. I enjoy having this mountain to climb. I enjoy seeing the goal, and it's immense. And when I get little victories on the way there, it feels good. It makes you high almost. Like I, I don't know if that makes any sense.
No,
It's
it
fun to
does. It
me.
makes complete
Yeah.
sense. I think that the challenge animates you. It gives you a reason to fight. It gives you a reason to push for liberty where there is little liberty. And if you're going to a place where there already is a lot of freedom, a lot of liberty, there's no there's no fight to have. I mean, there's the fight to preserve it, to keep it. But if your goal, if you find fulfillment, if you find purpose in spreading liberty, there's no more fertile ground than the place where there's the least, right?
Yeah, and I
And
make this illusion all the time. Like pressure makes diamonds, right? Like
Mhm.
in the most inhospitable environment, in the worst place, in the most evil place where the outlook is the most bleak, that's where you need to dig down deep and find the best ideas, the best activists, the most brave people. Like you need to call on your very best. You need to be the most creative. You need to be the hardest working. There's something romantic about that, right? Like I think we alluded to a little bit offline by talking about democracy. Like a lot of people think activism means democracy. How do I get more people on my color of team to say yes to the thing I want? If you do that in New Jersey, you're going to lose every single time because both colors, red and blue, hate you. They don't like you. They don't understand firearms. So if you want to win a battle about firearms and you waste all your time talking about constitutional rhetoric, you're going to get pounded by your enemies because they don't understand the rhetoric. They don't care about the rhetoric. They're agnostic to your rhetoric. You need to be creative, which is why I allude to guerrilla warfare. You got to fight cultural battles. You got to cleverly label your enemies in with language and terms that the hordes on the other side that outnumber you will sympathize with you. And Saul Alinsky, who wrote the book that like informed Barack Obama, who he cited, when he was president, he wrote books about the Deep South. He wrote examples about in the Deep South during this segregation, where he was like, how can we get these diners in the South to allow black patrons to sit at the counter? And he was like, I will go pay a bunch of activists to comply with this obtuse requirement. I think they had to have some kind of ID, which was very difficult for black Southerners to get at the time. So he like purposely went and got like several dozen of these activists, got them this difficult to get ID and sent them into a diner one by one to the point where all the white patrons that were mad about this just left. Right. And they were pissed. And there was a mechanism of showing like F you to the owner. Like if these peaceful people want to eat in your diner, which in legal terms is an extension of the public space, we will go into your public space and peacefully coexist with you. And that's effective, right? That the majority of people in the Deep South didn't believe in integration. They didn't believe in that black man being able to sit at the counter with white men, but they leveraged a wedge against that majority, right? They used a cultural battle to beat that problem. They didn't say, let's go to Birmingham or let's go to Tallahassee and vote our way out of this. They used guerrilla warfare. They used different creative tactics. That's the type of stuff that people in New Jersey, that spirit, right? I'm not saying identically that case, but that spirit, they have to draw on that creativity. That's how they can win their battles. I don't think they do it often, but the few times that they have, they've been able to illustrate the fallacy of their enemies and sometimes overturn policy. And it's worked a couple of times in the last 10 years with groups like NJ2AS, who used to document and record not only politicians, but police departments who would adjudicate permits. And when Chris Christie was running for president in 2015, before Trump won, he was going on the national stage on cable news and saying, I alleviated carry rights. This is all prior to Bruin, right? I alleviated carry rights in my state. I'm pro-gun. And Chris Christie was not pro-gun whatsoever. So we said, okay, instead of arguing with Chris Christie's rhetoric on TV, which was false, we didn't argue. We didn't engage in rhetoric. we did undercover videos of like 10 police departments and recorded chiefs and said, hey, can I get my carry permit? I just watched this clip with Chris Christie, and he said, I can get a carry permit now. He liberated our laws under 2C58-4. And we did like a montage of all of these chiefs kicking us out and laughing at us and saying that that's BS, not true. So when you show the opponents literally telling you that the Wizard of Oz is lying, it's not Dan telling you that he's lying. His minions are saying that he's lying, and you're watching it live on a camera. So that to me is more effective. That's where the battle is truly won.
Yeah, and part of my motivation for asking you why not just leave? Why stay in New Jersey is that, right? I mean, you became the mayor of Englishtown, and you passed this resolution that refunds a significant portion of the fees to get a permit there in New Jersey to the residents of Englishtown, and Englishtown has changed because of that, right? So you're making that change locally. You may not change New Jersey yourself, but if 40 other towns adopt the policy that Englishtown has taken, or the approach that Englishtown has taken, maybe New Jersey eventually changes. And if not, at least it's changed in Englishtown. It's changed in your home. It's changed in your community. And so I think that's a powerful message that people underestimate, is the power that you have to change your local community. I don't know if you're familiar with Brian McClanahan. He does the Brian McClanahan show. It's a history podcast, and he has this saying. He says, "Think locally, act locally." And I think that too often we bang our heads against the wall thinking about how to change the United States, thinking about how to change our particular state, and we miss the forest through the trees. And the change really comes from the bottom up. It comes with you. It comes with your town and your community first. So I think that your example there in Englishtown is a great one. So that was part of my motivation in asking that question. I guess, do you have any thoughts about that sort of approach? Do you think that's an effective one to exact change or to make change in a state like New Jersey?
Two things come to mind immediately. You conjured up to me like Jordan Peterson with his trope about clean your room, right? I'm sure if you've read 12 Rules or whatever. Right. Like that's like the perfect encapsulation of what you just said, because I could be sitting in my bedroom in my little suburban town in a state in the United States, and I could be pontificating about what I think Donald Trump should be doing today and how he's wrong or right or left, right, whatever. And the people with the most vocal opinions live in a pigsty, right? It's like the irony. It's like, why don't you worry about fixing your domain, right? Do good in your bedroom. And people might think, well, that's irrelevant. Who cares whether your books are put away or your laundry is put away or your bed is made? There is a purity to that resonates outside the bedroom. Because if you can master your domain, your bedroom, the first step, clean things up, clean yourself, brush your teeth, mop your floors. And if your room has order, if your room is clean, now you can tackle the next step of like, what can I do downstairs? And then maybe outside your door, and then maybe in your local community. So I completely agree with that sentiment. Master your domain, do good in your domain. For at least the 2,300 residents of Englishtown, they are saved from the tyranny of the state in this little way, right? And if there was 50 English towns in our county or 200 English towns in New Jersey, those people would be saved. They would achieve salvation from the evil of the state. So I agree 100%. And moreover, I think it's insidious and intentional that our media algorithms on social networks and your news that you watch that's propagated by the government itself, like, if there's a reason they drive you to giving a crap about what Trump is saying today, right? That's not an accident. It's insidious, it's evil, it's intentional. Because if you're busy, worrying about what is this tribe this vague nebulous tribe, which I'll allude to with Republicans and Democrats, what are those jerks doing to me today over there in Congress? If you really think about it, they don't really impact you that much on a day-to-day basis, no matter what they do. And if you didn't watch TV, didn't listen to some talking head or some douchebag that writes books, didn't listen to the radio, didn't turn on Facebook, and you just lived your life with your family and your neighbors, you probably couldn't tell the difference between the Biden administration or the Trump administration. You wouldn't know the difference whatsoever. You only know the difference because someone told you to know of a difference. So I completely agree. Like, you have dominion over this locality. Do good where you have that authority. Do good where you can impact your neighbors. And that gets into a deeper philosophical conversation we won't go into, where politics is not the answer, right? It's
Right.
community, and the people that you build intentional community with, they protect you, right? Not democracy. But that's another discussion. But I completely agree with you. People should worry more about who lives on their block, how they can help their neighbor fix their garden bed or mow their lawn or drive their son to a soccer practice, and build relationships with your neighbors, because those people can help you and protect you more than Donald Trump can. And that might not make sense to a lot of people who are embedded in the partisan world, they're embedded in the political world, but it's something that the older I get, the more I understand and agree with you.
Well, this would have been a great way to close the episode, but I want to get to a couple other
Sure, I
points
got time.
before we close up. I know you're up to. We talked about the resolution, obviously refunding a lot of the fees for the permitting uh, extraction or tyranny there in New Jersey, but that's not all you're up to. Tell us a little bit about what else you're up to. I know there's the Struck v. Platkin case. I'd like you to mention that, and then any other initiatives that you're promoting or pursuing there in New Jersey.
Yeah, so I mentioned Francisco v. Cook. That was my carry case, which I achieved relief by getting my permit, even though they put a bunch of restrictions on me. I've already since reapplied and removed those court orders, so I'm no longer under them. The second case that I got involved in was Struck v. Platkin. Matthew Struck is a friend of mine. We are both co-plaintiffs on that case. And that case is challenging a measure within 2C58-3, which says that when you apply, before I mentioned those three permits, the middle one, which is a license to a permit to purchase a handgun. So in New Jersey, when you have the FPIC, the Firearms Purchase Identification Card, you can buy an infinite amount of long arms at any time. You can buy an infinite amount of ammunition at any time. But for handguns, you must get these individualized permits. And the permits are now $25 each. They used to be $2 prior to this December 22 bill. So they jacked that up by 10 point something percent. And you must get an individual permit. And then when you receive those permits, they used to be physical, they used to be papers. They just digitized this within the last few years now. You can only buy one handgun every 30 days via NICS check. So when you do your NICS, you conceivably you pass the NICS, you're handed the firearm, then a clock begins, and you cannot go through the NICS system for another check on a handgun until 30 calendar days have lapsed, at which point you can expend another permit. And as another trick, you can only apply for 6 permits at a time, and they're only valid for 180 days, at which point they expire. So it has this perverse incentive to the applicant where you over apply for permits, because the process to go through it can take months. So you over apply, get more permits than you need, then you feel compelled to rush through the transactions and buy guns as quickly as possible. So you line up the purchases of what you need, and then you start wanting things. So they've actually proven this system causes people to buy more guns than they intend to do to begin with. So if it was just open, you'd buy that one gun, that itch you have, you'd scratch it, you'd buy it, and you'd walk away. But because you feel like, oh, that's such a process to get all these permits, and oh my God, these 2 permits are going to lapse in 60 days, crap, I have to go buy another gun. It's a really perverse system. So myself, and Struck are the 2 plaintiffs on that case. I believe last week our case wasn't joined with, I want to say Benton, because it was another similar case. So I think our case is now taking a back seat to that case. But there was a decision in the Ninth Circuit, I believe, last week that was also very similar. It was like 1 gun a month policy with a waiting period, and that got struck down there. So I eventually think we're going to see this all go away. And Bruin was a great springboard to, as you aptly put at the beginning, the text and tradition of all of this background is that interpretation is going to be the springboard for a lot of other victories. Let's put it that way. And so this is just another way we can contribute. Cases need plaintiffs, and it's not all fun being a plaintiff. A lot of people attack you, you're targeted, people come after you. So you kind of have to like cross this Rubicon of being a pariah. And then once you're a pariah, you don't care anymore. So you can keep doing it. But there's a lot of people that don't want to jump into that realm. So I think it's fun. That part of that romanticism that I alluded to earlier, to me, this is like my purpose. Is what I should be doing. I should be trying to advocate for my community. I should be trying to help my friends and family. And it's a human imperative, right? An individual human deserves the right to protect themselves and be free. So I will do what I can within reason to try to achieve that and try to help make that happen.
And I know in Francisco versus Cook and then in Struck v. Platkin, you were working in both cases with Firearms Policy Coalition. If you would, just in closing, tell us a little bit about what it's been like working with FPC, and then just give us some final words about what you think people can do to promote the right to keep and bear arms.
That Firearms Policy Coalition probably, in fact, not probably, definitely are the most aligned with my political philosophy. And I've made many friends there. I know the people who, the majority of the people who work there. I have friends that have since gone to work there that were activists in New Jersey that I know very well. So we have nothing but good relationships with the people there. They are probably the biggest purists when it comes to explaining the philosophy of liberty. And let's just say I've had very in-depth conversations with the top people there. They're some of the smartest people you'll ever meet. And they will cite for you books and philosophy and rhetoric that I guarantee you no one else in the gun world or any of the political movement know about, engage in. Very, very smart people. And I'm very thankful to them. That's why I proudly wear their swag. Like, to me, it's not like I'm proud of them. I'm proud of the work they do. I'm proud of their philosophy. And even when I've done partisan stuff in my time, like election type stuff and campaign type stuff, they've sent their attorneys, their allies, and their friends to come speak at my events. And I'm in awe listening to them. They are great at rhetoric, great at explaining a philosophy, great at building an argument, and they're just good people. They're good humans. So I love the people at the organization. They've been very good to us. And at the end of the day, they are the ones packaging the capital to be able to fight these cases. So anyone can talk about things on Facebook, on Twitter, or X. I still call it Twitter. I can't call it X. Everybody loves to talk about rhetoric and Monday morning quarterbacking. And I would do it this way. I would do it that way. Listen, somebody has to roll up their sleeves, convince someone to separate themselves from their capital, and then do the best job at distributing that capital to the allies who can produce results. That's not easy. Not everyone can do it. And more so than anything, I appreciate their rhetoric. They don't lobby politicians. They don't engage in democracy, which I've alluded to before. They are, if anything, they're sardonic to politicians. Like just go on X and read the handle for gun policy,
Yeah.
or read their rhetoric. Like, the words that begin with F and Y are almost at the beginning of every one of their messages.
Yeah.
That's refreshing, right? That is not polite. It's not, it's ironically cerebral, but not cerebral at the same time. It's like a yin and yang thing, but like it establishes a certain temperature, one, but two, it changes the mindset of the allies within the movement. Because I can tell you 20 years ago, 15 years ago, even 10 years ago, the rhetoric in the gun movement sucked. It was, to me, kissing up to the state, kissing up to law enforcement, defending, like saying, we really want this, but then we'll defend the status quo in 7 ways. These guys are just saying, they're like in the movies, they're like lighting the cigarette and throwing it on the gasoline and blowing up and walking away, right? There's a value to that. They're saying, listen, none of this is legitimate. F these people. Let's print freedom. Let's just fight for maximal human freedom, which I believe is their unofficial moniker. So yeah. I respect them. I think they're good guys, and I'm very appreciative that they let me be a part of this journey with them.
Yeah, I like their approach as well. I'm like you in that regard. I think, it's refreshing, because so often you hear even people who are uh, supposed advocates or allies of the Second Amendment who nevertheless get caught up in this conversation about how we're going to give up our rights, but maybe not as much as the politicians would like us to, right? And it just becomes this sort of death by a thousand cuts, and FPC just says, no, we're not even interested in that conversation.
Yep.
We'll talk when you get serious about what laws you're going to get rid of. That's the compromise, right?
Absolutely. It's like, and you can apply that philosophy to politics in general. Like, I don't have any respect, including our president, right? I don't respect these people who are like, we're going to change this, we're going to change that, we're going to alter this. I'm like, I don't want to hear how you're going to change it. I don't want to hear how you're going to rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic.
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk abolition, right? What are you destroying? I'm regressive, right? My philosophy is regressive. When it comes to the state, I'm regressive. What are we destroying? Are we abolishing the ATF? I don't want to hear about how you're firing the people there. What are we abolishing? And that's never the conversation, not with Republicans ever. You vote your way out of a general election every 4 years. What federal agencies have been abolished in 100 years? Zero. But there's always more coming online. And Republicans hail them. Like, look at Space Force, last term. Oh, this is great. Like, why? Why? Eventually, these are the things that are going to shoot us one day with a drone because we said a bad word or something. But like, Republicans are like, yeah, this is great. Like, no, why are you cheering this? Do you not remember Ruby Ridge and Rayco, like what these people do to us when you're just sitting in the woods, not bothering anybody? But yeah, man, I don't respect these politicians. I don't respect these statists. I want to hear. There's one I do. I'll say I respect is Thomas Massey. I think he's a good person. I respect him a lot. I respect Ron Paul during his time. I don't even think his son is as good as him, anywhere near as good as him. But those are like if you make me say who do I love as a politician, like maybe those two names jump to mind. But most of these people are total BS artists, right? They never talk abolition. It's always, now I'm in the chair. It's my turn. I'm gonna do all this cool stuff. Like, I'm gonna print $2 trillion, but I'm great. Like, no, you're literally doing the same thing the last guy did. But
it's cool when I do it, but not when the other dude does it.
Right? Exactly. The other dude's a different color party than I am, so he's a different team.
Exactly.
Okay. Good luck with that. I don't know.
Well, Daniel, I really appreciate you tagging along for the podcast. I really appreciate your work there in New Jersey and Englishtown in particular, and then, of course, your work with FPC as well. Do you have any closing thoughts you'd like to make before we close up the show?
No, I'll just say, look, I think you brought up probably the most salient point of this conversation, which is think local, act local, right? Get off the algorithms, get off yourself, get off of this thing attached to our hips, right? Turn off the cable news, which is one of the worst cancers in the world, is watching Fox News or CNN or any of that stuff. That's not real life. That's programming, right? They're programming you to repeat a certain narrative, talk about a certain discussion. Turn that all off. Go down to your local watering hole. Go down to the local bowling alley. Go down to the local social club. Go play a sport with other humans. Go love your neighbor. Go love your friends. Go love your family. It sounds hippie-ish, but it's true, right? Because if you love the people around you, you're not going to want to harm them, right? And if my community is so small that when I do something people don't like, they're in my face. And that's a good thing, right? Like, that keeps me in check from wanting to do anything stupid or anything that would embarrass me in this little community. Whereas, like, the mayor of New York City, do you think he gives a crap about anybody? Like, it's all just a game to get to the top. And then once you're there, these people can be forsaken. Nobody cares. I love the think local, act local. I think if more people focused their life on that, and honestly, it would clinically solve depression. It would clinically solve a bunch of physical ailments. And this delusion that, like, somehow because you on Facebook put up a meme about Barack Obama that you saved the world. Okay. I mean, that's a great fantasy. Or that you quoted Ben Shapiro or some pundit, like, that you were doing a moral good. Okay. You're basically like, you're eating Burger King, man. You're buying a corporate product and you're eating it and you're just repeating it to everybody else. but you don't see the difference between these pundits and McDonald's. It's literally the same thing. Love your family, love your neighbors, do good. I love the think local, act local. That's probably the best parting message I could give.
Yeah. Well, amen. I really appreciate your time, Daniel. And again, thanks for all your work. I'll link to the article by John Petrolino about the work you've been up to there in New Jersey, as well as the FPC website, so that people can follow along about what's going on with the Struck v. Platkin case. And then I'll link to your X page as well, or so that people can follow you on social media. Is there any place else people can follow you, or they should look at, or resources that you think they should follow?
X is my main haunt. That's the place where I spend the most time. I have a Facebook page, but it's really just for the local stuff in town. I don't really like post anything on there. Find me on X. DMs are open. I love meeting new people, love talking to new people. I'm thrilled to have met you, Alex. Thoroughly enjoyed talking to you. But yeah, I love people. I love building this community. I always like finding new like-minded people and making new friends. So find me on X, and I'm happy to interact with people there.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again, Daniel. And thanks to John Petrolino for putting us in touch.
John's
All
a
right,
great
everybody.
guy.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the show. Of course, as always, you can find us on YouTube, X, Rumble, and Facebook. You can also find us at forgeoffreedom.com and on all the most popular podcast streaming platforms. Until next time, remember, you are the Forge of Freedom.